Good evening, everyone. My word, what a reception. Now, Hugh, I am seriously out of my comfort zone. I don't get often nervous, but I am tonight because I'm not cooking. And I'm chairing, and I'm in between these two greats. They really are greats, the greats that I look up to anyway. A few things. First off, stop drinking. I know you are. You're having a little sip. Hang on. Wait until these guys tell you to, please. And how come I haven't got a glass yet. That's not right. Not right. So just hang on to your glasses for a while, please. Later on in the evening, you will be asked to vote. We've asked you to vote as well, pre-vote online, so I hope you've all done that. At the end of the evening, we'll be asking you to vote. You should have a card with you, a little card similar to this, Bordeaux, Burgundy. And you will need to tear it in half, and you put in the urn or the ballot box the one that you vote for. Now remember, we're not voting for which one of these two wines is the best. We're voting for the choice of Bordeaux and Burgundy. The characteristics and the style, that's what's up for discussion tonight. So, Bordeaux, Burgundy, into the urn or into the ballot box. If you don't know, you put both in. If you want another glass, that's not going to happen. That is not going to happen. So that's how it works. So I must say, for me, it's an incredible honor to be here tonight, an honor to be amongst two greats that I look up to, as I said, an honor to be in front of you as well, many of which I believe enjoy wine, like myself. And probably Gavroche customers as well. I've noticed already a few. So thank you. It's great. When I got the call to do this, I immediately jumped to it. I said, yes, but why me? Why the chef? Well, I suppose it's because I am French, after all. I have French genes running in my blood, as well as French wines. You two will be glad to know. And one of my first memories of drinking wines, as you all know, maybe you don't know, I know there are a few French people in here, as you grow up as a child in a French family, you get to sniff the wines at a very, very young age. And you get a bit of wine with a drop of water in it, and I mean at a very, very young age, to get you used to drinking these wonderful wines and to appreciate the finer things in life. And one abiding memory I remember, and I could have been only about 7 at the time, and it was a Sunday lunch, family lunch with friends, close friends, and I had to sat at the table for the whole period of the lunch. The starter, the main course, and then dessert came. And dessert came, and Dad grabbed me, and he said, "You've got to put your nose in this glass." Sweet wine had arrived. So he forcibly pushed my nose into this glass. And I smiled, I must say, I did smile. And then he said, "Maintenant faut goûter. You've got to taste." Oh, all right, then I will. And it was ambrosial, nectar, the finest cough syrup I'd ever tasted. Chateau d'Yquem, no less. What a way to start. What a way to start. So I was sold on it, absolutely sold on it. So that's my little anecdote of how I fell in love with great wines. Enough said on that. These two really don't need much introduction, but I'm going to. Our first speaker tonight, arguing for Bordeaux, is one of the world's leading wine authors. He has written a host of bestsellers, including the World Atlas of Wine, which I have, you'll be glad to know. In fact, I've got several copies, which he co-authors with his opponent tonight, Jancis. And his annual pocket wine book, which I have several copies as well, whose 2015 edition is available now. Yes, we're not afraid of plugging this stuff now, I'll tell you. His books on gardening and trees are also celebrated. Unfortunately, I do not have a copy of those, but I shall be out there buying one soon. And making the case for Burgundy, we have another titan of the wine world. Her books include the hugely successful Oxford Companion to Wine, Wine Grapes, and the aforementioned World Atlas of Wine. She is the Financial Times wine correspondent, and her website, jancisrobinson.com. Yeah, well, I told you we weren't afraid of plugging things here. Has subscribers in more than 150 countries. She was the first person outside the wine trade to qualify as Master of Wine in 1984, and that's Jancis Robinson. I think they deserve a round of applause just to get us going. Just a little question to both of you. How did you fall in love with wine?
Very appropriately, it was a Burgundy. I wasn't brought up with wine, really, but when I got to Oxford, I was exposed to some pretty nice wine, not least thanks to a boyfriend whose father gave him a little bit too much money. I liked this man very much, the father in particular. It was an evening at the Rose Revived in Witney, which I looked up today and saw TripAdvisor just 3 stars today. And it was a bottle of Chambol Musigny-les Amoureuses, 1959. Which was so much better than any student plonk that I had tasted up to then. And I put my nose in it, and I could tell that in here was history and geography and personality. And I could see that this was something that would give me huge intellectual stimulation, but also just masses and masses of sensual pleasure. And I am on the record as saying that Bordeaux, you can appreciate Bordeaux from the neck up only, but not Burgundy. That's my story.
And Hugh?
Well, our senior universities are doing a very good job because I'm the Cambridge contingent here. The snag is that the wines were Burgundy. But there was I pretending to work one evening in my rooms at King's, and my roommate came in a bit the worse for wear, a sort of disheveled dinner jacket and a stain or two down his shirt, and he said, Hugh, he said, taste these. You've got to try these 2 wines. He must have spilt a bit coming upstairs, but I did. And groggy as I was with English literature buzzing around my head, I tasted them. I said, but good Lord. I said, yeah, I mean, this one is, I don't know why you showed me this one, it's nothing much, but this one is absolutely amazing. And he said, well, believe it or not, they come from within, let's say, 100 yards of each other on the hillside. And I suppose, in a way, that was the seed that grew into the World Atlas of Wine.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, without any further ado, I think it's time for you two to express yourselves to the full and start the debate. So, Hugh, your case now. Up you go to defend the virtues of the beautiful drink that is Burgundy. Oh, sorry, Bordeaux.
Actually, Jancis and I might have spun a coin for this. I rather hope somebody was going to flip us on the night. Bordeaux, well, I mean, self-evident. Bordeaux is actually, like several other wines, port being pretty obvious, and champagne being less obvious, but equally true, was actually designed for this market, the English market. We are its natural drinkers. I'll explain in a minute, but the point is that we didn't have a great choice in the Middle Ages, it's perfectly true. But when Bordeaux and England were both under the same crown, it was as good as having those vineyards in England. We didn't have any vineyards in England. So everything about Bordeaux has been precisely tuned and focused on what we like to drink in this country. I dare say our tastes have changed a bit over time, but it still pleases us enormously and in huge quantities. What is it about the taste? It goes so well with food. It is not beefy. It's a dry wine. It's a refreshing wine. You can always come back in fact, you always must come back and have another sip or two. It asks questions. It stimulates Jancis, I hear, above the neck. Well, it stimulates all sorts of parts of me. And I believe it does you, too. I don't think that I'm absolutely without friends in the room. But it will be, when the moment comes for voting, and you put your X, where the X is on the glass, I believe, you will have made a very sensible move. And I'll know you're doing it honestly and in a true spirit of a fine British drinker. Michelle.
My word, you're supposed to take 15 minutes. You've only taken 5.
That was the opening statement. Now I've got a few other remarks to make.
Aren't they on there?
They are. Oh, I'm confused.
Up you go, Hugh.
I'm always confused. I have to take a bit of ammo with me. Remind me of what I'm talking about. Very good.
I'm convinced already. I mean,
No.
What it says here is to thank Michel for letting himself in for this party, and to thank Hannah for inviting me to be part of it, and to greet Jancis as collaborator, lifelong friend, and superstar, and of course the great wine opinion former of our time. So if she can't form your opinions tonight, she's having a night off. I said earlier, we could have spun a coin about this, and I was happy either way. But drinking is a serious business, so do take me seriously. And I'll remind you of Frank Sinatra's remark when he said, I really feel so sorry for people who don't drink. Because when they wake up in the morning, that's as good as they're going to feel all day. Well, Jancis will deploy some pretty fancy arguments. She's got it all at her fingertips, and she will demonstrate to you that for finesse, for sensuality, for variety, for the soul of the thing, Burgundy is where it's at. She might even cite the variety of soils of the Côte d'Or and elsewhere. She will probably mention the pinot noir, which she might rashly claim is the best red grape. I'm just second-guessing you, my dear, don't mind. Trying to undercut your pitch. And how on the Côte d'Or, or elsewhere, the Pinot Noir interprets the soil so perfectly, so transparently that you can tell exactly what you're drinking, where you're drinking it from, with a sniff and a sip. Well, aren't we lucky to have all these choices? I mean, here we are, uncommitted drinkers. You will commit yourselves later in the evening, I know, with the choice of left bank, right bank, Volnay, Nuit Saint-Georges, come to that old world and new world. The world is out there, and it offers us an unbelievable variety of things that we might drink. I know that this is actually what really attracted me to wine in the first place, was the fact it wasn't all the same. If you can find something to enjoy where there is a different interpretation or a different version of it every time, for every day of your life, for all I know, thousands and thousands, that's a pretty good thing to collect if you're a collector. And that is the way that my mind goes. I can't see a new wine bottle or a new wine label without wanting to know what it's like. I just want to get the cork out and have a slurp and see whether it's something that I didn't know about, whether it's something better than I expected or not so good. There's always that stimulus, as though one needed stimulus, it's curiosity. And I think curiosity is both a fault and a virtue, but I'm jolly glad that I'm full up to the top with it. Now, we have in our glass, the one with an X, the sample that I chose to represent Bordeaux. What a fantastic responsibility. I mean, Bordeaux produces more fine wine than anywhere else in the world, and that's not an exaggeration. It is a huge area. It actually produces 5 times as much wine as Burgundy. So it starts with a bit of an advantage, the wider choice. The wine I've chosen is from Saint-Julien, in the middle of the Médoc. Many people's first choice in Bordeaux, I'm going to say claret, actually, because it's 2 shorter syllables. Claret, what does claret mean? It means clear, light wine, and it goes back to the Middle Ages. It was the wine that was first shipped immediately after the harvest. You remember Beaujolais Nouveau? Well, it was like Beaujolais Nouveau. You couldn't get it home quick enough. It wasn't going to get any better. In fact, it would go off if you kept it until the following year. So claret was the clear wine that had been immediately racked, didn't have any sediment, any lees in it, and was taken home. So claret has been our national drink, as I remind you, I said earlier. And one of the first clarets that people seem to understand and take to from the Médoc, Saint-Julien lies right in the middle of the Médoc. It's not a wine of extremes, it's a kind of you're good, or you're very good, or you're wonderful, average claret. This is a fair take on what claret means altogether. This is Chateau Lalande-Bory, and it's 2009, which is a banker vintage. It is at the age it is now, 6 years, it is beginning to show where it's going to go. And as I shall explain, one of the great virtues of Bordeaux is that you can keep it with confidence if it's good, and find that years later, you've got another version, and probably a better version of what you bought in the first place. This capacity to age and to develop and become more interesting is something obviously not unique to claret, but it's built into the formula, I think. So nature was very kind in 2009. It did everything right. It was called, as so many vintages are, the vintage of the century. Somebody said there are actually 3 kinds of Bordeaux vintage. There's a restaurant vintage, there's a luncheon vintage, and there's a vintage of the century. So this is one of those. And what do we look for in it? Well, the tasting routine will be familiar to everybody who's bothered to buy a ticket for tonight. I'm absolutely sure I don't have to tell you where your nostrils are or where the opening of the glass is. You apply one to the other. You take a long look at it. Because the light is not the most revealing in this room. Happily, I have a piece of white paper, and actually, when I'm tasting, I always carry a bit of white paper, because if it's some other color, you don't quite get the picture. I look at it and I see it's a powerful dark red, as I would hope from a young wine of a good vintage. The color is deepest in the middle. And if you look at the edge of it, the rim, you'll see that it's already just started to fade a little bit. It's paler at the rim. Well, as it gets older and older, you'll see that the rim grows broader and broader, until with very old wine, there's quite a sort of ring of white around the wine. This is because inside, the pigments and the tannins are doing all sort of magical chemical things together, precipitating color and forming new molecular combinations, which come to your nose and make you smile. So the sniff is a very important part of it. It is dry, is it not? It's almost astringent. You feel acidity in it. You feel this isn't quite what I'd call a delicious taste. It's not easy, sweet, sort of something sumptuous that it's not like being served a lovely pudding. It's definitely it's one of the appetizing things that belongs in the savory part of your taste. It is dry. I feel it's even a little bit salty. It tastes of fruit, but not obviously of any fruit that you could possibly imagine. has a fruity flavor which will stay in the front of your mouth and sweeten your palate a bit, but not to the point where you could actually describe it as sweet. And then it is also drying other parts of your mouth, not so much the front part in the middle, but you are getting a slightly astringent dryness which leads you to have another sip, which of course is the secret of the whole thing. That is the secret. I don't need to say more about Saint-Julien, really, but I will just say that Lalande-Bory is called from the Bory family, who have been landowners in the Médoc for a very long time. They own Chateau Ducreux-Caillou, and they own Chateau Grand Puy-Lacoste, two names which will be familiar to a lot of you, I know. They play at a very, very high level, and they had an opportunity a few years ago of buying a bit of land which had been from another class growth. I believe it was Chateau Lagrange. Why Lagrange was selling part of its huge and wonderful vineyard, I can't remember. And they started making a wine which is not a class growth. It has been declassified to that extent. It doesn't belong to a class growth chateau. And the funny thing in Bordeaux is that land that belongs to a class growth is classed land. I can't excuse that. It's ridiculous, but it's true. It's never spoilt my pleasure, and I don't suppose it will yours. The Borys started Lalande-Bory in order to have a wine of this caliber. In other words, not a super celebrated wine, something could be sold for a relatively modest price, and that would please all claret lovers. Julie and I are just back from California, where we had a fantastic time and the weather was wonderful. One of the snags there is when you look at the wine list, the prices are absolutely astonishing. I mean, basically, a Napa Cabernet starts at $100, if it's got any self-respect. And I looked at a wine list with great interest. The three cheapest wines on this posh restaurant wine list were all French. And they were a Saint-Emilion, a Sancerre, and a Chablis. Well, if in California they think all their wines are worth more than of those three wines, I think they've got a problem. Well, they will in the long run. There's another problem they haven't, but I didn't come here to talk about Napa Cabs, but I will say this, that very few people buy another bottle of the same. In fact, it stops you on the first glass. It's terribly strong. It tends to be sweet. It's in your face. And it's not what you really want to go with your hamburger. And I always think that the secret of a successful wine business is to sell two bottles rather than one. So I'm not sure why they get hung up on what the hang up is. We are broad-minded about wine. Okay, we love claret best, don't we? But we're very broad-minded. We'll try wine from anywhere. Funnily enough, I mean, to us, Bordeaux and Burgundy are rival suppliers, and there are other rivals. I mean, there is Kiwi Sauvignon, and there are other things you could drink, but I don't advise it. But the nation that invented chauvinism does see things quite differently. If, by any chance, and it won't happen, somebody in Bordeaux were to be offered a glass of Burgundy, either red or white, he would say thank you and be perfectly gracious about it, and he might even taste it. He might even force a smile. But his next remark would start with the expression, quand même. What does quand même? It means even so, notwithstanding, all the same, it's drinkable. Do I have time?
You've got about a minute.
I've got a minute. There are two cultures. They are not friendly to each other. In fact, they're embattled and always will be about the virtues of their wines. Pinot Noir, the pure produce of this wonderful land of the peasant where everybody belongs to the land and the land belongs to them. It's happened for centuries and centuries. Bordeaux, this concoction for the British market, where there isn't even a native grape. The cabernet, the merlot, all that family were imported from somewhere else. They didn't grow wine in Bordeaux at all until they found a market for it, and that market is right here. So they started on this mongrel product, blending cabernet and merlot, because these grapes succeeded on their gravelly land. They found the deepest gravel. They worked on its reputation. They worked and worked and worked. They produced a product for the consumer, for you. They didn't wait for nature to give them an advantage. They found the advantage, and they have, over time, perfected it. Neither Bordeaux nor Burgundy was as good a few years ago, or over time, as it is today. Both have definitely upped their act a lot, and recently, to our great benefit. They've changed their nature a bit. Bordeaux has got more potent, riper to taste, more fun to drink in a way. Burgundy has gone rather in the opposite direction, I submit. So Bordeaux is here, it's available, it's understandable. It comes in big units, not in tiny little vineyard parcels, but in big, big units. There are 250,000 bottles of a first growth. Even Petrus, the rarest Bordeaux, makes something like 30,000 bottles a year. Romanée-Conti, which everybody worships in Burgundy, although most people have never tasted it, it must be true, in a good year makes 5,000 bottles. So what are they offering the world? A very, very exclusive product, a gleaming diamond for the super rich, for the snob.
Objection, my lad.
And time's up anyway, so come on.
It's time to get. Is it time to sit down?
Yes.
I can go on doing that. Yes. Very well, thank you.
Very good. Thank God he ran out of time. I wouldn't have had a chance otherwise. Okay, I don't have much time, so let's look at those three elements that were in my glass of Chambon Musigny, Les Émerauts, all that time ago. History. Well, as Hugh has just admitted, if you take the two heartlands of French fine wine production, the Côte d'Or in Burgundy, the Médoc in Bordeaux, the Côte d'Or has been growing vines since at least the 1st century AD, before Christianity. We've discovered this in 2008. Suddenly an ancient villa was found just outside Gevry-Chambertin. Until then, we thought it was the 3rd century. Whereas the Médoc, full of these class growths, was a marshy swamp until the Dutch were given a license to drain it in the late 17th century. And when, according to Hugh's lovely book, The Story of Wine, it was still described as sauvage et solitaire. So wild and just beyond the pale, basically. So Bordeaux is basically a parvenu, as Hugh admits. Geography, we move on to geography. Now, of course, the thrill of Burgundy, partly as a result of its long history, is the precision of its geography. And as co-authors of the World Atlas of Wine, Hugh, we agree wine is geography in a bottle. What's lovely about Burgundy is that its maps and its taxonomy are so refined, so precise, so dependable. And if all other variables, such as wine producer, vintage, technique is the same, different wines from different vineyards do taste different. Vosne Romanée Malconsor does taste perceptibly different from Vosne Romanée Chaume just down the hill. It's got a bit more clay, it's a bit lower, and it's very, very convincing. It's geographically convincing. At village level, the wines share common characteristics. Vosne will be lovely, racy stuff always compared with Gevry's richness and Chambol's transparency. And over all these centuries, there's hardly been any change to the boundaries or the map in Burgundy. Medieval monks who did so much for viticulture in Burgundy would recognize many of the names that we see on labels today. Contrast that with Bordeaux. Where, for a start, chateau owners are, as Hugh has just said, Lagrange said, chateau owners are constantly swapping parcels of land. And very, very few Bordeaux chateaux are one contiguous estate. They're sort of a little bit here and a little bit there, and I'll swap that with my neighbor. Even the boundaries of the communes change. I mean, the Saint-Julien appellation was recently reformulated to include somewhere that it never did. Well, I won't go into too much detail because I'll be running out of time. But as for the general character of each Bordeaux appellation, we were taught, as we were learning about wine, that they each had perceptible character. Saint-Julien was sort of in the middle. Margaux was scented and perfumed. Pauillac, a bit stricter. But these have been eroded recently too, not least because the Bordeaux producers have so nakedly chased points from certain American commentators. And so, says headmistress Jancis, they've been beefing up their wines, as Hugh has just admitted. They've got richer and riper, and they've actually blurred some of those lovely distinctions that they used to have and that they should be so proud of. So one big point in my book in favor of Burgundy, oddly enough, is that they don't actually bend to curry favor with us wine writers. In fact, I've been going to Burgundy to taste the latest vintage every year, every autumn for at least 15 years. And I could count the number of invitations I've had to break bread with the vignerons on the fingers of one hand, whereas it is very different in Bordeaux. So we come on to personality, and I'm afraid here Burgundy wins hands down over Bordeaux. Although I must remember that we're being filmed, and therefore I must be reasonably discreet. What's great about Burgundy is the dirt. I don't just mean the all-important dirt in the vineyard, but the dirt on muddy boots, the dirt in fingernails. Someone even like Dominique Lafont from as noble a domain as Domaine Comte Lafont, he has filthy fingernails because these are the people who both prune the vines and make the wine. Whereas in Bordeaux, hardly any of the most famous wine folk would know what to do with a pair of secateurs. They're much more familiar with spreadsheets because Bordeaux is above all a place of commerce, as Strabo noted in his 7th century geography. He didn't mention wine at all in the context of Bordeaux, he just said it was a place of commerce. But I shouldn't complain because the Bordelais, unlike the Burgundians, are super lavish with their invitations. But it's always clear exactly why they give so many extravagant tastings, lunches, and dinners. The same commercial phenomenon that saw the Bordelais spend so much of their time in China a few years ago, courting this new market. Now, of course, having actually lost rather than gained money on the expensive vintages they were persuaded to invest in, the Chinese have seen through the en primeur circus, which is what it is, and I'm off to take part in it on Friday. And Nick, I know, says, well, why on earth are you doing it yet again? Because I'm curious. So we'll be shown, hundreds, if not thousands of us will be shown little cask samples of the latest vintage. How do we know what relation they bear to the final blend? I don't know. And anyway, nowadays, there's no great scramble to buy early from the cask because prices have been softening. Bordeaux's had 3, possibly 4 lackluster vintages in a row since the great but overpriced 09 and 10. But this didn't stop the chateau owners from asking ridiculous prices for them. So now, the Bordeaux merchants and have sellers who buy wine from the chateau owners, and there's some overlap between them, have cellars full of unsold wine. And younger wine drinkers around the world today, there are many of them who actually don't really know Bordeaux, because you don't see Bordeaux on the wine list of all that many places where these young people are going. Le Gavroche's wine list is a noble exception, which has many fine Bordeaux crew on it. But I'm worried, and I'm not the only one, about the future of Bordeaux, because I have a feeling they are losing, they've lost their appeal to a new and younger generation. But even this has done nothing to make the Bordelais take any notice of a letter sent to them by the 12 top buyers of Bordeaux among the UK merchants, who were asking them to release this latest 2014 vintage at no more than the 2008 prices, because otherwise they think they just won't be able to sell it and attract customers. But they're taking no notice, because sadly in Bordeaux pricing is all about being slightly more expensive than your neighbour, rather than actually attracting consumers. On the other hand, Burgundy pricing has been really quite judicious. They either keep their prices, that's expensive, it has to be expensive because, as Hugh says, it is produced in tiny, tiny quantities, far smaller than Petrus. Say a Grand Cru might come from just 2 barrels, whereas, the first growth chateaus are full of hundreds and hundreds of barrels. But they don't zoom up the prices, and the prices do have something to do with quality. The traditional UK wine merchants have been making so much less money selling Bordeaux recently that they've all been trying to develop new areas, such as Barolo. But it's almost impossible to find a new source of supply in Burgundy. You have to join the end of a very long queue, and that's another attraction to me, the constancy of trading arrangements. Burgundians sell to the people they've always sold to. And it often goes from one generation to another, rather than just passing it on along a sort of very ramified chain to the merchant who then sells to the importer. And in between the two, there's a courtier, a broker, who has this wonderful job of ringing up the chateau and saying, "What are you thinking of charging?" Then ringing up the merchant and saying, "He's thinking of charging this, what do you think?" And communicating between the two. It's very, very indirect society, Bordeaux. So, in conclusion, you'll be glad. How much longer have I got, Michel?
You have got 3 minutes
Ooh,
if you want them.
Great. Oh, I do. So, today, with the great advantage of being responsible for the Oxford Companion to Wine and getting in all the feedback for the World Atlas of Wine, there is one message coming from all our correspondents around the world, which is that they are seeking fresher, lighter wines that express vineyard rather than winemaking. And guess where can deliver that so easily? A great red Burgundy is above all transparent. As you can see in your glasses, it's not as deeply coloured, and it is fresh, it's beautifully perfumed. It does, we're not judging, the vote, as Michel said, is not on these two particular wines, but I hope is on our arguments. But you can see how beautifully perfumed red Burgundy can be. I would argue that it's easier to pair with food than red Bordeaux, thanks perhaps to its slightly softer tannins. I love the way that wine dominates the wine town of Beaune, but it's basically the countryside that's so beautiful. The villages, the worn stone on the slope, the vineyards, so much more interesting landscape than the flatlands of the Medoc, I would submit. I will spare you the grimness of a 2007 Bordeaux blind tasting I did the week before last. I could go into detail, but it was deeply disappointing. And the price of the boring wines in the middle was £50 a bottle, and it just didn't seem right. They just weren't earning that price. It was more that complacency was ruling. It's very funny that now, well, I'll leave that out.
You're running out of
yes.
time now.
No, I'm running out of tact.
Yes.
But I will finally address one of the very few criticisms that's levelled at Burgundy, which is unpredictability. The unreliability of producers is no longer true. It was, but the dodgy negociants are by and large a thing of the past. And the better producers actually manage to produce really good wine year in, year out that is absolutely gorgeous. So thank goodness for both Burgundy and Bordeaux. I'd hate a world without them. And if I've got any time left, all I'll do is just say these romantic names. Romanée-Conti, Puligny-Montrachet, Nuit Saint-Georges sounds good enough to me. There's just so much romance in Burgundy. I hope you agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, bravo to both of you, and hopefully now the gloves are off. I need to just announce the result of the pre-vote. So before the debate, we have 45% for Burgundy, 35% for Bordeaux, and 20% don't know. Why don't you know? I don't get that. I really don't. I'm sorry, I don't understand it. And another thing I will say is if a chef cooks for me and he's got dirty fingernails, I wouldn't eat his food. Now, is that the same for the wine?
Oh. Well, he's not stirring it.
Well, technically, maybe not. But yes, I mean, I think you make some great points, both of you. But it's going pretty low when you're saying, choose your wine, Burgundy or Bordeaux, because they've got lovely hills, or because one of them was.
Yes, but you want to go there and enjoy it, the landscape.
Yes, but I'm not drinking the landscape. And the other one was a boggy marsh until the Dutch came in. When did the Dutch have anything to do with drinking wine? They drink schnapps, do they not? I don't know. But you make some very valid points, and I must say, price for me is one, and I'm sure for you as well. Price issues, and I think both regions have price issues. I mean, you're championing the fact that you can still buy.
Yeah, with difficulty you can find nice, inexpensive Burgundy, but they're not rapacious in the way, and there are fewer layers in the sales link, so you're not paying extra for the courtier making the telephone calls.
I thought I'd got over this problem by talking about Napa Cabernet. If you really want to see where people are rapacious, it's in these wineries trying to make their names in the New World and just thinking that by piling on the price, they will gain respect.
Well, the Bordelais have not been backward in piling on the prices, though.
Well, they have this worldwide market. They're getting the price. China was a silly mistake on their part. How they can have been to China and eaten in Chinese restaurants and thought there'd be a culture switch suddenly, and the dishes would stop coming round on a dumb waiter, and they'd have a proper orderly meal and have the fish before the meat, so that you could have the white before the red. It's not going to happen.
But surely, you see, when it comes to price as well, there's an issue of quantity. I mean, some of the finer Burgundies, there's just not enough to go round. And as a restaurateur, I find myself begging for my single bottle of Domaine Romanée-Conti, and I have to beg and get on all knees. And please, I want my
Alex
allocation.
Ferguson got them all first.
Well, he did, didn't he? Yes, and then he hiked the price up. And, yes, but let's not go there. But surely in Bordeaux, you can buy some good middle-of-the-road wines at a very reasonable price, and they can offer equal pleasure.
Well, I checked on this because I'm unaware of these cheap wines. Now, let's take, from not the cheapest wine merchant in the country, Berry Brothers Good Ordinary Claret, which is good. Okay, it may or not be ordinary, but it's £9 a bottle. And it seems to me a fair price for a jolly good bottle of wine. And, of course, lots of people sell it cheaper than that.
I think, and I've said rather boringly for a long time, that some of the best value in the wine world at the moment are the petit chateaux from the two great vintages, 09 and 10, in Bordeaux. They're stonking value. But when you come to one of the less good vintages, where the grapes didn't get properly ripe, and the poor old proprietors whose costs are not that different from the costs of a first growth, and yet they're only getting, €5 for a bottle rather than 500.
Isn't Burgundy lucky not to have poor vintages?
Yeah, well,
I told you the gloves were off.
You say that. But you see, 2013, the growing season was appalling, and we all went to taste them thinking, this isn't going to be much fun. They're really, really good.
Right, on that note, I think we should take a few questions from the audience. Now you've had a sip, you've obviously been waiting, so hands up, and we've got some mics going round, so they can point you there. So can we have a first hands up? Oh, there's a gentleman there. I'll take 2 or 3 questions at a time.
I would like to contribute to the debate as follows. In the 19th century, in the great Larousse, the distinction between Bordeaux and Burgundy was the following one. A Burgundy was to Bordeaux what a mistress is to a wife. It's typically French, of course.
That's very French, isn't it?
You're not expecting me to comment on that, are you?
No comment, let's move on. Another question, please. My word, you're a shy lot.
No.
There's one at the front and there's one at the back. Yeah, start with the gentleman at the back there, that's it.
So, to date, the discussion has focused on the great red grapes, but I wonder if we talked for a minute on the white grapes of the 2 regions, whether your arguments would be emboldened or diminished.
Oh, well, I think that's for another day, isn't it, really?
It's a good one, though.
But it's a very
lovely
good
question.
Depending, we'll see whether we run out of time. I mean,
Yes,
that
maybe.
would be a good thing to revisit, wouldn't it?
It would be something to revisit, but I mean, I've already said my piece about sweet wines, and Ikem for me, well, you know, do they have the equivalent in? No. Okay, let's move on then.
Isn't the proof of Bordeaux's inferiority that the French were prepared to let the English have it?
Where did that clever question
there is a
come
response to that. How did the English acquire it? Was because the daughter of the Duke of Aquitaine, the famous Eleanor, married the King of France. Then 15 years later, she kicked him out of bed and took Henry II of England to bed. So actually, it wasn't carelessness on the part of the French, it was their choice.
Oh, touché. We have a question here. Yeah.
Thank you so much to all 3 of you for coming and speaking. It's been very insightful. Which auction house do you think is the best auction house to buy wines from?
Oh, well, that's a tough one to answer. Should we answer that one or should we move on swiftly?
It's not how I buy my wine.
Be provocative, come on.
I don't buy wine at auction, I'm afraid.
Do you buy wines at auction?
No, I said that's not how I buy wine.
No,
my wine, so I don't know.
These 2 don't buy wines at auction. I occasionally, as a restaurateur, buy wines at auction, it's not easy, and it's not for everybody. You've got to make sure that you know what you're doing, and you've got to be sure that you're buying what is actually on the label. And that's very, very important, especially nowadays. But that, I think, is another subject. And I don't think it really influences the debate tonight.
Quite right.
So, a lady here.
Hello. I am a Burgundy drinker. Absolutely. And I drink Burgundy with everything. But I was interested with fish, with meat, with eggs. So I was interested that Mr. Johnston, when talking about having his dinner, what he said, and you start with your fish and you have your white wine. So does this mean that Bordeaux is that limited, that you can only drink it with certain foods?
Well, we do make wine. I mean, they make white wine, very, very good white wine in Bordeaux. That's not a limitation, but I think Michel's the expert here.
Yes, thank you, Hugh. The debate between white wine and red wine of the 2 regions is maybe for another day, because we are tasting reds. And I think we're talking about predominantly red wines. However, I do disagree slightly with you, because as Hugh said, there are some absolutely amazing white Bordeauxs that are very food-friendly as well. And I think what you're intimating is the fact that a Burgundy is probably more food-friendly and can go with fish, can go with eggs, can go with et cetera, and so on and so forth. However, a really old Bordeaux, one that has had time to mature and has lightened up and still has a little balance of fruit and acidity, will also match a really good meaty fish. And I have done so, in fact, in previous food and wine dinners. Lobster as well. Lobster, a matelote de homard with a little bit of red wine in the sauce. You cannot get better with well, maybe you can. I don't know. But I don't want to influence you. It's not my job. I'm chair. But it is one of those things that can work very well. But isn't it wonderful that we're actually debating this? Now, more questions. Maybe on the right here, because I'm conscious I've missed you out. So.
Oh, hello. Neither of you have spoken about the sensual experience of the wines that you're talking about, as far as I'm concerned, anyway.
Well, I kind of touched on it at the very beginning.
Well, I had a go at describing my Saint-Julien, but obviously it didn't come across. But that is a difficulty.
Yes, I mean, it's pleasure after all.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what you're saying, isn't it? I mean, it is the pleasure of drinking and how much pleasure you get out of Bordeaux or Burgundy. I'm guessing that's what you're intimating.
Yes, but perhaps I could chip in. I think a lot of the sensual pleasure of wine is in its aroma or developing into something more complex. And actually that touches on perhaps quite a significant difference between the two, that in general, Burgundy is more perfumed in youth. Then Bordeaux can be a little bit low-key, and you're getting a lot more tannin, and you're tasting potential rather than reality. But I would be the first to admit that a great old Bordeaux reaches parts others don't. It's a miracle sometimes that it lasts so long. But sadly, we are living in an age where very few people can afford or physically have space to age wine. And so there's a certain convenience, in a way, if one can use such a debased word, in red Burgundy, which can deliver sensual pleasure earlier.
But there are two schools as well, basically, which are being demonstrated in the two glasses you have. And it's a very clear-cut difference. Bordeaux has grip. Burgundy has, whatever it has, it's not grip. The another four-letter word. So you've got a ready-made demo here, and you've got a choice. Which of these two glasses gave you more pleasure? And that is what we will find out, I trust, later on.
But as Michel said, it's not, the contest isn't strictly...
But this is our evidence.
Yours cost a lot more than mine. But
There's a gentleman over there.
Hi. Hello. Yeah, of course these things are not mutually exclusive. You get both. I like both Bordeaux. I play cricket against Bordeaux Cricket Club in the grounds of Château Giscourt, which is fantastic, particularly when it's raining. And we go to every Hospice de Beaune weekend in November. But for me, if you're looking at taste, the delicacies of a fine Burgundy, like a Latrissière Chambertin or a Clos de Verger, which you can get for about €80 a bottle, but say 2009 or something like that, these are fantastic tastes which really are not met by only... anything other than the very best Bordeaux's, and they're much more approachable, younger. So for me, Burgundy wins it purely on the delicacy of the taste of really good Pinot Noir.
That's a statement and not a question.
Right, well, okay. Well,
you have to disregard it then.
Right, let's have some more questions, please. Up there, yes? We'll take a few from up there.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed tonight. Thank you so much. I'd like to open this up a little bit and talk about other regions which share superficial similarities. So I'm interested, if you were to have a debate about Australian Cabernet Sauvignon versus New Zealand Pinot Noir, would you be talking about similar characteristics, or is the New World producing wines that are profoundly different?
Well, neither of us, I see, really went for the varietal question. I mean, I admitted that Bordeaux is a mongrel because it's got lots of varieties in it. But this is the old world, new world question, really. And are we looking for the same qualities if we are buying a Coonawarra Cabernet or if we're buying a Medoc? Well, thank goodness, no. I mean, thank goodness that we actually have this huge range of choice. And I want Australian wine to bear the marks of Australia. Absolutely I do. And there are things that only wonderful flavors that only Australia produces. I don't want them to taste the same. Actually, just in parentheses, Bordeaux and Burgundy used to taste very nearly the same because most of the liquid in the bottles came from the Rhone or indeed Algeria. The idea that we have this sort of pure authenticity, it's bottled by the man with the dirty fingernails who made it, is a very new invention. The first person to chateau bottle wine was, well, admittedly 90 years ago, it was Philippe de Rothschild at Mouton. But the idea of bottling by the producer is absolutely brand new in Burgundy. It used to be very much stirred up in a big vat by the famous négociant houses of Beaune and elsewhere. And Rhone wine was a large part of it. And actually, I must just recall that 1972 was the year when this was outlawed by the European Union. Excuse me. And dear old Avery's of Bristol, who always satisfied their customers with marvellous wine, had to stop putting labels that suggested that this wine was a Montrachet. It was called Baron de Montfort or something, which in fact was the brew that they found their customers over many years appreciated and loved. So we are in a very different world from the one of 40 years ago.
But it was still well into the late 70s, if not early 80s. You could find Avery's bottles with one label stuck on top of another.
Right, let's have a few more. Up there at the top.
Hi, yes, thank you very much. It's been very informative. But with respect to, please comment on this, with Burgundy, is it the uniqueness of Burgundy and the Pinot Noir and the terroir that makes it special? Because if you look at Bordeaux and Old World, Bordeaux is created, or the blend is created in Spain and in Italy with beautiful wines, Vega Sicilia or Anaya, that match a Lafite or a Mouton or a Latour. So is it because Pinot sucks everywhere else on the planet?
No. I think that the lady up there would disagree with you. I think she's got a tendresse for Kiwi Pinot, personally. And I am amazed because when I started, well, even 20 years ago, I think we all said, nowhere in the world will produce decent Pinot apart from Burgundy. They're all trying, but actually, I'm just back from something called the World of Pinot Noir in an event in Santa Barbara, tasting, and that's just one of many chances that we have to taste Pinot Noirs from Chile, from Oregon, from the cooler bits of Australia, certainly from New Zealand, and the quality of them is zooming up. So they haven't got anywhere near the sort of crunchy, funky terroirness. That's a word we haven't used tonight, isn't it? We haven't used the word terroir, which is quite funny.
Everybody's relief, I expect.
Yes.
But I take issue with you on that one very technical point of where the Pinot Noir is crunchy, because we were more or less the same time as you in California the other day, and then we have a wonderful life. We tasted a Pinot Noir actually in the Napa Valley that sent me driving 200 miles north into North Sonoma to see where it was made. It was absolutely magical, and I could have confused it with very, very good Burgundy easily.
Yeah, that's absolutely. No, this is what I'm saying, that the Burgundians no longer have a monopoly on fine Pinot Noir, I don't believe.
There we go.
But nor can they make Bordeaux.
down at the front. Yep, that's it.
Hi, hello. When we speak about the two regions, especially about Burgundy, you mentioned vineyards and vine growers. But when Bordeaux was one of the first regions to truly go into the winemaking and enology, it makes wine much better than it used to be, and it was copied in any other region in the world. In that case, where stands Bordeaux in front of Burgundy in terms of winemaking and actually blending and everything that makes wine so much better with the actual hand of the man?
Well, the University of Bordeaux has been a great leader for the world in how you make good wine, there's no doubt. Professor Pinot at Bordeaux University set completely new standards in how to choose the moment to to pick the grapes. And I mean, I won't go on into the technical side of it. But Bordeaux is absolutely, it's not just a fuddy-duddy old place that's been making wine for a very long time. It is actually has the cutting-edge university where people from all over the world go to study.
Yes, and are you from Bordeaux? Yeah, because I do find a phenomenon, which is, yes, of course, quality in Bordeaux has increased admirably and excitingly, and particularly technically. And as Hugh says, they're past masters in studying the exact effects of different little tinkerings with, toast of the barrels and length of time and fermentation temperatures and things. But quite a long time ago, I remember there was a deputation over from Bordeaux to present to us wine writers the fact that Bordeaux now, this must have been about the late 80s or early 90s, Bordeaux now was so much better than it used to be. This was true, but so were the wines of everywhere else. Everywhere has been increasing so rapidly. And wonderfully for us consumers, you, as a wine producer, you only stay in the game if you make better wine every year, which, thank goodness, pretty much everybody is. But I don't think that, again, the Bordelais have a monopoly on it.
Up there, up the very, very top.
Hi there. I just wanted to ask you both, over the last, say, 10 years, I know it may be a little bit taxing this time of night, what's the highest score you've given to the best Bordeaux, and what's the highest score you've given to the best Burgundy you've tasted?
That's an easy question for Hugh.
I never give a score to anything, I'm afraid.
Well, what's the best you've tasted? And
what's the best wine I've tasted?
Of Bordeaux and Burgundy.
The scoring system doesn't work for me. I think I am innumerate. I just can't handle numbers when I'm thinking about tastes and pleasures. I can't handle numbers as well, or at any other time. So I don't do scoring. I do have a very, very rough and ready thing, which I do when I'm tasting a whole lot of wines for the first time. I put my scoring system is a tick, a cross, or a question mark.
Jancis?
Well, I see scores as a sort of necessary evil. And when I started my website, the en primeur market was hot, and people really wanted a quick guide to what they should buy long in advance of them getting a chance of ever tasting it. So I've never really worked on the 100-point scale, so I work on the 20-point scale. I'm just flicking through here to see if it's got any clues from lovely wine dinners where I might have given
the little black book. This is the book to have. Forget any guidebooks. This is the...
No, well, it's actually on the website. I should look.
There we go. It's on the website.
I'm sure I have given some 20s. They would probably have been to really pretty old red Bordeaux's. Good question. Yes. Yes. But I'm sorry. Too many wines.
Too many good things.
Look it out.
Thank you very much. I wanted to apologise first because I'm not going to advance the debate at all. I'm going out to Bordeaux for my first en primeur tastings in a week or so, and I wanted to ask if you had any advice.
Don't expect to enjoy it.
That's a common statement.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Don't drive.
It's very, very difficult to drink wines en primeur. I mean, you can't drink them anyway.
Yeah.
You can't drink them anyway.
No, it's sort of ink. I suppose the only thing I'd say is try to get your impression of the vintage on the first day, because from then onwards, really what you're tasting is the relative differences between, I don't know where you are, I'm afraid, so I'm sorry.
Up there on the left.
Oh, right. Hi. After that, what you're capable of noticing is whether Chateau X is better than Chateau Y. But it's really only the first day that you're sort of sensitive enough to see what the vintage is actually like compared to a typical year. I think that's really all. And I hope someone else is driving.
Yeah, not easy. We've got time for another 2 or 3. So down at the front.
Hello, thank you for a very enjoyable evening. I'm quite a collaborative chap, and I wonder if each of you could suggest one thing that your region could learn from the other. Or do you perhaps think you should each stick to your knitting?
That's a very interesting question.
Wonderful question.
I could think of one.
Well, actually, I've got a sort of answer to that in a way, which is, could you make Burgundy and Bordeaux, or vice versa? I mean, because that would be fascinating. The French authorities would put you in jail, but you could plant, Pinot Noir in the Medoc or on the right bank, and you could certainly ripen merlot, cab franc. You might be able to squeeze cabernet sauvignon somewhere in Burgundy. How good could the results be? I mean, that would be a fascinating experiment.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question, but it would never happen. It's not
No.
going to happen.
No way.
Knowing the French as I do, it's never going to happen. Now, I do believe that the ushers are going to come round with their ballot boxes, so now is the time to get voting and make that decision. As I said, you tear off and you put in your choice. If you still don't know, which is crazy, you put both in. And just a little bit of a... Good Lord, you're an unruly mob, aren't you? That's it, give you a glass of wine and you're gone.
You're away.
Can we have just a little bit of silence before I get all chefy and start swearing at you? Quiet down a bit now. Shush, 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 shush. Shush. Behave. Right. Just 2 minutes they have, no more than that, to sum up and to just give their all. Hugh, do you want to go first? 2 minutes.
I went first last time.
You went first last time. Jancis, over to you. 2 minutes to sum up. Quiet, please.
Jolly difficult, because we've ranged far and wide, haven't we? Summing up. You've got to be... Well, it sounded as though it helped to be British, to like Bordeaux. Whereas perhaps Burgundy has a more direct appeal to the senses. So it doesn't matter what nationality you are. I would certainly absolutely concede that it's easier to find a bargain in Bordeaux than Burgundy. But you have got to choose your vintages very carefully. And with Burgundy, it really does help to get to know the names of the producers, which is the key, the best producers. Even the most basic Bourgogne Rouge from a good producer will deliver enormous pleasure. And I wish you lots of it. I think that's as best as I can do.
You?
Well, we'll discover who's in the room, because if we have a room full of geeks, Burgundy will win.
Oh, you. So underhand.
If we have a room full of true Brit drinkers, it'll go Bordeaux's way. I can't see well enough to judge you from here. That's it.
That's absolutely succinct and to the point. Now, there's still coming around, so please do put your vote in. It's very, very important. I mean, it's not it's not the elections coming up in 50 days. It's not going to sway either way, and I don't think that Monsieur Farage is in the house. So there's no beer, no pints of beer. We're not debating beer against wine.
Oh no,
something far more serious, far more serious than that. So I think
I do have an answer to the last question.
Yeah, well, please, yes.
If that's all, the one about which what could each region teach the other, and there's a slight nod to the white wine faction here. I'd say that the white wine makers of Burgundy could learn a bit from the white wine makers of Bordeaux about how to avoid premature oxidation. But they are doing so. It's well underway, that.
That's a very valid point, yes, that's a very valid point. And the amount of bottles I've opened over the past couple of years that have been completely oxidized, I mean, it's a very valid point. And I have a British...
But not of Bordeaux.
But definitely not a Bordeaux. But I have a British palate, and I do like the older white Burgundies. I don't mind a hint of maderization, a hint of oxidization.
But when it's
flat and gone, I mean, it's such a complete waste. The votes are being collected, but we can throw it out to the audience and have another couple of questions there. If anybody's still got a question, I can see a hand up there. The gentleman there in blue.
Over on the right. Yeah.
Well, there's one here at the front as well. Have we still got the mics? We don't have the... Oh, here we go. Gentleman here.
You were both prepared to flip a coin and speak on the other side. If you had a three-sided coin, would either of you be prepared to advocate for the Rhone?
The Rhine?
The Rhone.
No, but I'd go for the Rhine.
Or the Mosel. I'd happily speak in favour of the Northern Rhone. I would like those alcohol levels in Chateauneuf to just temper themselves a bit before speaking strongly in favour. There are some lovely Southern Rhone wines and some great value, but the most admired wines, put it that way, or some of the most admired wines of Chateauneuf, just getting, when they're 16%, it's just a bit uncomfortable for me.
Very uncomfortable, and that's down to the weather, I think, as well.
Yeah,
and it's been
we haven't
extremely
really
hot.
mentioned climate change, have we?
Yeah, that's true. And for me, I'm a huge fan of the Rhone Valley. Huge fan, and I think they're great with food. Very, very food friendly. One more question. There was a gentleman up there with his hand, or just behind there. There's the lady there. Yeah.
There's the auction house one.
I drink red 10 out of 10 times, but if you were drinking white, I'm curious to know what each of you would drink.
Riesling.
Yes, you're a huge fan, aren't you? Huge fan of the wine.
There's a very strong synergy, actually, between lovers of Riesling and lovers of Pinot Noir.
There's a chap over here who's had his hand up a long time.
Yeah. What white wine would you drink?
As between Bordeaux and Burgundy.
Was that the question, or was it any old white wine? Any white wine, I think.
What would be the first on the list?
Well, I'm a great lover of the Riesling grape, and why they don't grow it in Bordeaux or Burgundy is a great mystery.
Well, I'm going to throw a cat amongst the pigeons and say Condrieu for me. Condrieu.
Yeah.
Love Condrieu. Condrieu, the
You know what?
the
We
aroma.
could just throw out names of wines and we'll get some clap
Yes.
in some corner of the room.
I'm sure we would. But Condrieu for me, I mean, it doesn't even need food. You could just drink it whenever. Breakfast, lunch and dinner. So apparently somebody up here had a... Yeah.
So in any sane world in which you're not intellectually bereft or emotionally stunted, Burgundy would be the hands-down winner of this debate.
Is that a question?
Why is it, please, why is it that so much Burgundy is dilute and disappointing and overpriced?
Who are you buying it from?
That's a quantitative question.
Well, I'm sad that you have such terrible experiences. But, well, maybe you need more of a guide. Maybe you need JancisRobinson.com.
Yes, or Hugh's pocketbook.
Oh, he's going to say now.
But it is true, is it not, that Burgundy fell into the...
Are you offering me a subscription?
No.
But there's a partial answer. Burgundy fell deeply into the hands of the robber barons, of the merchants, and they made such a mess of it. And it went on and on. And the whole idea of the beautiful, pure, authentic, transparent wine that Jancis is talking about is a novelty, it's a rarity, and you have to struggle to find it. I couldn't agree more that it's the most sublime drink on earth, bar one, but it's unfamiliar to most people. To most people, Burgundy is a bit of a stew.
Well, it has got so much better. I mean, the robber barons era ended certainly in the 90s, and there are so few dodgy producers left in Burgundy. There are underperforming growers, I'll give you that. But the era when stuff was just being trucked in from any old where and blended up is pretty much over. I'm very worried about you.
Go and see a doctor. There's somebody else behind it that had a question.
Right, so now I have a question for Hugh Johnson and another one for Jancis. The first one for Hugh Johnson would be, what would be your most sensual, amazing experience that you would have with a Burgundy? And to Jancis, that would be, what would be the most exciting experience that you had with the Bordeaux?
That we have actually had, you mean? Or not imagined for the future?
Yes, that you had.
Oh.
No invention, no invention.
Hugh?
Well, golly, this is a question I dread, because although my long-term memory is supposed to be improving, my short-term memory has had it. I don't know quite where to look in my head for the answer.
Do you know what? And this perhaps, it doesn't answer the question of where to find good value Burgundy at all, but one of the most exciting Burgundy experiences I have is tasting in the cellars of Domaine Leroy, whose wines are just got so much energy and excitement. She was an early adopter of biodynamics and so forth, and she's utterly uncompromising and very difficult. But what there is in that cellar is extraordinary.
They spoil you for the rest of Burgundy.
Yes. And I also remember when Bouchard Père et Fils was bought by Joseph Henriot of Veuve Clicquot. There was a lot of old wine in the cellar. And I remember a great dinner there, picking away at some of those plums. Because really old Burgundy in good condition is very rare. And there was a chance to enjoy some there.
And they went back to the 19th century, too.
Yeah.
It could be that old, yes.
Yeah.
Well, we're still waiting for the results, so we've got time for another question or two. The lady in the front.
And tasting at Domaine de la Romanée-Conti isn't too bad either.
No, I was just thinking that.
As a casual wine tourist, which neither one of you are, which region is easier to visit?
Oh, as a wine tourist, that's it, yeah, go on.
Burgundy.
Yeah.
Burgundy?
Certainly. Much.
Definitely.
Bordeaux is only slowly opening the doors of its chateaus to let in the odd tourist.
Has everyone voted? Because then I can tell my story.
Everyone has voted. Everyone has.
No, I mean, Bordeaux can be very grim to visit. And, there is a tradition of the chateau owner in his blazer. There's a story about, is it Strabo who wrote about, the Roman author who wrote about Bordeaux?
Yes.
Well, he's supposed to have spotted a negotiator Britannicus on the quayside of Bordeaux. He knew him by his blazer.
I would say, I mean, if you're new to wine tourism, head for Provence. Head for Provence, Languedoc, along the coast, Bandol. They are extremely friendly. They embrace wine tourism, and there are many degustations you can have there, and some jolly good wines as well, some very good food. So head for that region, and I tell you, you will have a wonderful time, a truly wonderful time.
Better swimming than Burgundy.
And great swimming, yes, you can jump into the Mediterranean and have a whale of a time. Right, now, I have to remind you of the previous vote, as I said, was 45% in the favour of Burgundy, 35% in favour of Bordeaux, and 20 don't know, fools.
There you go.
And I hope there's not as many don't knows. And the vote for tonight.
What? Oh, no, sorry. I was reading the top line. I thought I read the top line. I thought, there's no change.
The vote after tonight. 55% in the favour of Burgundy, 44% in the favour of Bordeaux. So that's gone up. And only 1% of don't knows, thankfully. Thankfully.
So the swing on the
That's very good. Well done.
Plus 1% swing. Now, I don't know about you, but I have had an absolutely amazing time, and I wish it could go on forever. It's been wonderful. So thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for your participation as well, and it's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Bravo, Michelle.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Well done.